Okay.
Gotta turn it over to her.
Can everybody hear me? Once or twice in my life, I've been asked to speak up. Just once or twice.
It's a little low,
It's what?
a little low.
I just moved the
Yeah.
speaker.
There we go.
The
There we
microphone
go.
closer. Okay. So can you put the slides up, Greg?
Yes. Ta-da.
So I'm just, we're going to go quickly through the agenda and then the LPNA business. And the big item on the agenda is election of officers. And then we have a few other things to talk about. So one of the things we want to do is to thank a few people or organizations, really. We want to thank the Los Paseos HOA, the Homeowners Association, for letting us use their clubhouse. LPNA is not part of the HOA, but many of our members are part of the HOA, and we work very closely on several events with the HOA. So thank them for giving us the free use of their clubhouse. And also want to thank Five Star Pizza in the Bernal Shopping Plaza for the pizza that we have tonight. They also provide all the pizza for National Night Out. I think it was 90 pizzas at the last National Night Out. And the pizza's always, everybody loves pizza. It's always a big hit. So we really appreciate their help. And they bend over backwards to deliver stuff to us and do right by us. So that's very good. I'm going to do the LPNA Business and Neighborhood Update. And we had on the agenda the San Jose Police Department. Captain Donahoe was supposed to be here, but something came up. That's life in the police business. And so he's not able to be here with us tonight. But I'm sure that, that we'll have a police update at our next quarterly meeting. And then we're going to introduce our new council member, George Casey, who is here with us tonight. Our main presentation for the evening is on the Village Hub, which is a new initiative for emergency preparedness, and we'll all learn more about that tonight. Our next meeting is Thursday, March 20th. We have our meeting dates set for next year, and if they aren't already, they will be shortly up on our website for the 4 quarters.
So, is it raining there or no?
Okay. So the business at hand is election of officers for 2025. We do it annually. Then we're going to talk briefly about the Beautify San Jose grant that we just applied for, and our new project. That's news to everybody, and we're going to be talking a lot about that going forward. And just we have some pictures from our holiday event, just some eye candy for that we had last Saturday. So on to the election of officers.
All right.
The new term begins on January 1st, and all of the board but one have nominated themselves to continue in their roles. Greg Peck as president. Wave, Greg. Wave for the camera. Karen Latin, who is online, as vice president. Myself as treasurer. Secretary Lynn Steele, who is over taking the minutes. Alan Chan, our technical person. Webmaster and technical support is member at large. And Herb Bowen, who is also, I believe, online, is our technical support and interfaces with CERT and emergency preparedness for us. He also is very involved with the park. So even though members at large, they still get a task. We have one member at large position open. Peter Chen decided that with his new family obligations, he was not able to really devote the time to be a fully functioning member of the board, but he's still going to be involved. He still plans to be helping us and supporting us. But we have an open position, and I'll address what the meaning of the open position is and what happens regarding that in a minute. But first, the first thing I want to do is to basically we do the election. Now, we usually do this by saying, does anybody object to this slate of officers? Nobody else nominated themselves. So Does anybody either online or in the room want to abstain from voting or want to vote against
My wife won't let me have it.
any of the proposed officers? Give anybody a chance to speak up. It's actually never happened. Thank you. Thank you, John.
We don't
So-
have time for one right now.
So it's moved. Can we have a second to second it? All right. And all there have been nobody has raised any objection. So
Doing a lot of things.
the board continues. And I'll go on to the next page. So for the open position, under our bylaws, we have a flexible number of members at large. So if somebody comes along who is excited and wants to be involved and do things and make things happen, we can add additional members at large to the board. You don't want the board to get too large, then it gets unwieldy, but we can, there was nobody who nominated in time for this election because there was a deadline for nominations. But the board can appoint a member at large, which is subject to a ratification by the members at the next quarterly meeting following the appointment. So if there is anyone who is interested in getting involved and being on the board, which requires attending the board meetings as they occur. Usually the board meetings occur a few weeks prior to our quarterly meeting or when we are planning an event. And at the beginning of the year, we'll probably have an extra board meeting it probably amounts to about maybe one board meeting a month. And just before National Night Out, several board meetings. But anyone who is interested and enthusiastic about being part of an active part of this organization can contact any board member and suggest that, or can message us through the contact us on our website, which will then generate an email and can indicate that their interest. So we certainly are interested in having more people involved and engaged. So, Beautify San Jose grant. The grant request was submitted on Monday for $5,000 for the last several years. The maximum grant allowed was $5,000. And we've most often been able to find uses for all of it. The grant runs from April 1st to March 31st for, it's sort of been a sliding thing because of strange occurrences and unfortunate incidents going on. So it used to start in June, but now it starts in April. So out of the $5,000, the biggest single item is National Night Out. Half the money, $2,500, goes toward National Night Out. And that pays for the pizza, pays for the ice cream. We also solicit sponsors to pay for some of the extras because the grant doesn't cover the cost. Last year, for the last 2 years, we had more than 650 people. And it's one of the largest non-corporate sponsored National Nights Out in the city. And we've been very lucky to have a blues band for several years, and they are just marvelous. So, so that's half of the grant right there. The next biggest project in the grant is a new one. We usually try to have a project for the park. We're very supportive of Los Paseos Park. We've planted trees and we planted a native plant garden. We're now proposing something we've been chewing on for a few years, but it's actually moving forward, and we put for money in the grant for this, over $1,000. We want to do something with the wooden structure in the circle that's near the tennis courts. We're thinking of a rose garden. And the reason we're thinking of a rose garden is because of the irrigation in that area. The timing of that irrigation section is set for grass, not for drip irrigation. And they actually don't recommend drip irrigation for roses. And we've been told that roses should work with the timing of the grass irrigation cycle. So that's what we're planning on doing. It's ideally one wants to plant roses in January here. Because we're not so concerned about frost. We're more concerned about when there's water to get the plants to put down their roots. So we want to do it before the rains stop. So it's not time to do it this year, and the new grant doesn't start till April 1st. So it'll be January 2026 that we'll be planting the garden, but there's a lot of work to be done ahead of that. There's work on the irrigation system. There's work on preparing the ground for it. We have to come up with a plan for what we're going to plant and where we're going to plant it, what the design is going to be. And we're looking for people to help us do that because none of us are actually rose experts. I've done a lot with native plants and I tend the native plant garden, but I've been gardening with native plants for 15 years in my own yard. But I'm not an expert on roses. So we're looking for specifically people who know something about roses or who want to learn and know more about roses to help us in planning and implementing the rose garden. And we've got a year to figure it out because the grant, under the grant, it just has to be completed by the end of March. So that should be quite doable. So that is, any questions or anything about the grant or anything else? Okay. When we got the holiday event, we had a really fun time here last Saturday with Santa, always a big hit. And the fire department came, and the fire truck is always a big draw for the kids. We had lots of crafts, and there's a picture of a girl here doing a really good job on a paper gingerbread man. And this year, for the first time, we found a face painter who was able to paint faces. And the Grinch, I thought, was just amazing because the way the Grinch is done on the face, the person's facial expression becomes the Grinch's facial expression. And it was, when the Grinch smiled, it was amazing. And when the Grinch frowned, it was scary. And we had a lot of fun with that, but it was very popular. There was a list of people waiting to get their face painted most of the time for the event. And that event is also partially funded by our grant and will be again next year under the Beautify SJ grant. And we hold it here in this room. So that's the end of the LPNA business. And Greg, do you? Oh, Karen, did you want to say something?
Were you showing pictures of the event on the screen by chance?
See them online. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think anybody shared their screen. So we heard you guys talking about them, but we didn't see anything you've been talking about has not been shown on the screen. Well, we can move on. It's fine. We can move on.
Greg, do you want to move on? There we are. So now everybody, Karen, can you see them?
No.
Not yet? Okay, you got to share, Greg. It's always a technical glitch.
There we go. I think. There we go.
Oh, but you got to move the screen because we can see the painter, but not the paintee. No, you got to move.
Yeah, no, that looks good. I see 4 pictures.
But can you see the Grinch?
I see a girl with the Grinch getting painted on her face.
Oh, okay. Okay, it's not, we're not seeing the same thing here. Okay,
Interesting.
great,
Nice photos.
great. Do you want to introduce the council member?
So Greg, unshare your screen when Councilmember Casey's speaking so that we can see him.
George. Okay, George wants to be known as George. I'd like to introduce you and thank you very much for attending our meeting here. This is our last meeting of 2025 and appreciate you could be here and take the time to come. You'd like to speak as much as you want to let us know how we can work together in the new year. Thank you. You can sit here, right where Barbara was sitting.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'll try to be brief. I'll give you a little bit of background information about me for those of you who don't know me, and then sort of why I decided to run and what I'd like to hope to accomplish and how I believe neighborhood associations fit into what I'd like to do. So my family has lived here in District 10 since the 70s. I actually grew up here, went to Santa Teresa Elementary and Burnell Junior High. Um, Remember when the grocery outlet was Alpha Beta back in the day, and when Schober's gym was right here up the street. We'd come play basketball here all the time. So when I think of home, this is what I think of this neighborhood in this area. Um, I, as I mentioned, grew up here. For high school, I was supposed to go to Santa Teresa, but my dad sent me to Bellarmine to punish me for getting good grades in junior high and not being able to be around girls. Stayed local, went to Santa Clara for college and undergrad and law school. And then I got my master's in urban planning from San Jose State University and a master's in real estate development from UC Berkeley. I'm a practicing attorney, and that's what I thought I'd be doing for the remainder of my life. Had no intention of ever running for public office, but my mom, who's also a District 10 resident, was shopping over at the Costco shopping center, and she had her purse just snatched out of her hands. That was a seminal moment for me. I remember growing up here when it was the safest big city in the nation, and to have something like that happen was really surprising to me. I knew we weren't the safest big city anymore, but I didn't realize how far we had fallen. And so that set me on this course. The more I looked into local politics, the more frustrated I became. We're arguably the wealthiest city in the nation, but we don't have a fully staffed police force. We have an unhoused population that's growing, and we have a downtown that doesn't really represent us. Um, was fortunate enough to run and win, and I think my victory is a reflection of the team that we were able to put together. We had over 150, at times 200 volunteers working on the campaign. And that actually gave me an opportunity, because they were all District 10 people, to get sort of a boots on the ground view of everyone else's concerns. And that's where I think these neighborhood associations come into play, particularly for council members. You guys are here doing the hard work. For example, considering putting a rose garden in a public park. I mean, these are valuable quality of life additives that you as a neighborhood organization bring to the city. But I'll tell you why it's important for the council member and why the entire District 10 should have distinct neighborhood associations. Because information needs to percolate up to the council member, because the council member is not everywhere at all times. And conversely, if the council member has an idea or something that he or she wants to kill or promote, the information network and structure is set up through neighborhood associations. So it's only 10 or 15 calls to the board to get the word out to their members, where we can really mobilize and get things done. So my goal here in the first 100 days, I don't know if it's too ambitious or not, is to create 10 more neighborhood associations where they don't exist currently in District 10. And they're very valuable, as you guys have come together and done some productive things for your neighborhood. I can tell you there's a distinction between neighborhoods that have a neighborhood association and those that don't. Almaden Valley, for example, there's neighborhood associations all around there, and they're able to mobilize and prevent the city from doing certain things that they don't want to have happen. And I think all of District 10 should have that type of power and that type of voice to come together and to move things in a positive direction. And more importantly, as I mentioned, get information up to the council member. Another thing that's been happening here in this neighborhood, particularly with the businesses, is there have been burglaries and they're dealing with a lot of crime. So I'd also like to start a South San Jose Business Association where they can also have a voice in the political process. So I think combining neighborhood organizations and business organizations together outside of the city labyrinth and system that can put influence on policy, I think it improve our quality of life. That's the only reason I ran. It was a quality of life. Like I said, we spend a lot of money to live here, and it should reflect that. Our streets should not be, there shouldn't be any blight and trash around. For example, if you drive up and down sometimes Santa Cruz Boulevard or Almond Expressway and you see 3 or 4 feet of weeds, for me, it's frustrating. And pardon my language, I spent the last 4 or 5 years driving around just cussing at my steering wheel, like wondering what the heck's going on. And people say it's California politics, but I don't agree. You go to Southern California, Orange County, you see they've got beautiful neighborhoods, they've got beautiful freeways, they've got beautiful streets. You go up to Sacramento County, they've got clean, beautiful streets and beautiful neighborhoods, and there's a shine on everything. I'd like to do the same thing here in San Jose, and I believe neighborhood associations have a large role to play in doing that. So I'm looking forward to having a productive relationship with this neighborhood organization and developing and forming more neighborhood associations so that we can really influence local politics and the policy in the right direction to improve quality of life for all of us. Yeah, that's my spiel, but if there are any questions, I'd love to field them. And if not, happy to go sit down. And
Thank you very much for
Thank
being, you can stay right there for a second.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Karen has her hand raised, I think, but before we get to Karen, thank you for everything you said. It sounds very good and wonderful. We'd love to work with you on the things that you talked about. And in addition to trying to create new neighborhood associations too. We'll help you. We'll do whatever we can.
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir, we will. Welcome to the Los Paseos neighborhood.
Honored to be
And
here.
I have a question for you regarding the bike lanes that have been put up. I've heard people complain one way or another.
Yeah.
I was driving by a bicyclist who was going down one of those lanes, and I kind of slowed down, opened my window, and said, "How you doing?" He said, I said, "How do you like the new bike lanes?" And he said, "I hate them."
Yeah.
And you know why? Because they're filled with debris.
The trash, they can't
Trash,
get the
and
clean.
and there's before they could kind of go around it, but now they have to kind of like wiggle through it.
Right.
Oh,
So I think you might have mentioned that the street cleaning in San Jose.
Yeah.
So good luck with that.
No, I appreciate that. There's a lot of frustration right now with the Department of Transportation. It's really unclear what their thought process is in a number of these projects they're doing around the city. In particular, and not in our district, but just to give you an example, along Hillsdale, they've really put all of those little
Oh, yeah.
sticks all up.
Yeah.
And even the firefighters are unhappy with it because you can imagine if they've got to negotiate their way around traffic, I mean, it impedes everyone else. So I don't understand the logic behind them.
Yeah.
And to your point with the bike riders, they don't appreciate it. So it's hard for me. It's not really tethered to practical realities. So I have a meeting with the Department of Transportation head. I've only been in office for 2 days. I started Tuesday, and I'm trying to meet all of the heads of the departments. But the Department of Transportation and those particular questions, I plan on bringing those to him, and I hope to come back and report to you guys. Hopefully there is some logic, some redeeming value to what they've done. Even over on Winfield, like there's a number of these projects that have come up, and to my knowledge, there's no real value to them yet. But I hope to come back with some valuable information to you guys once I figure out what the heck's going on.
Very good. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Does anybody else have a question from the audience? For Karen, go ahead, Karen.
oh, hi, George. Welcome to the council. Welcome to Los Paseos.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to working with you on probably a lot of different things. I would say I met you at Jackie's. Remember?
Yeah, I know you are.
Yeah. I'm just curious, with the homeless issues, what are some top of mind, 1 or 2 things that you would like to do differently or that you're planning to get behind on that issue?
No, that's a great question. So there are some policies in place that aren't being enforced right now that I'd like to make sure are enforced. For example, the EIH developments that we have here, and I would say more than our fair share of them here, There's supposed to be a buffer of no abatement and no encampment zones around there, and it hasn't been enforced yet by the city. So my goal is to make sure that those enforcement steps are taken. Also, one of the reasons why I'm reaching out to the business associations to get them on board is because they are also dealing with some serious issues with the homeless encampments that are coming into their neighborhood, their businesses, and actually stealing valuable stuff from them, making it difficult for them. One proposed opportunity right now is particularly with the RVs that have been camped out certain areas here. I have an opportunity to pick certain streets with this new project that's going to roll out. I'm looking to see if there's a street here that has that we can earmark for that. But honestly, for me, enforcing the rules that we have on the books now, and unfortunately, this is not going to be popular, not making it so easy to be homeless in this area. It doesn't sound very, I think we should all treat everyone with dignity, but I think there needs to be accountability on both sides. I think we need to provide the services for the unhoused that they can use to benefit and better themselves. But I think it's incumbent upon them to be accountable and actually seek out these services. You can't just decide you live somewhere and pitch a tent and decide that's home now. And so I think we need to be more, we need to be humane. We need to create opportunities for them to go somewhere and get the services that they need. But we just can't turn a blind eye to what is basically antisocial behavior of folks just deciding that they're going to live out on the streets. So I hate to sound harsh, but we need to be more aggressive in terms of the policies that we have in place and actually enforcing them. I don't know if that was the actual answer you wanted, Karen, but
Yeah, no, that's I'm fine with that answer. Thank you very much.
yeah, my pleasure.
I have one more question.
Sure.
I see a lot of new apartments going up in San Jose. Have you been on Bascom Avenue
Yeah.
and seen it between Union and Bruneyard?
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable the amount of new apartments and cars that are going to be loaded there. How does the planning department deal and come up with these plans?
So I'm going to give you I'm going to make what seems like a bad situation even worse for you. Unfortunately, so I'm pro-development and pro-growth, but I'm for it in the right places. I think that type of dense development it should be in our downtown area or close to public transit.
Yeah, they're like 7 stories tall. Unbelievable.
Yeah, just like the one that's here on Blossom Hill from the old fish market site. That building is practically in the street.
Yeah.
And what the problem we have is statewide and citywide parking requirements have basically gone away. So you're going to have, and it's some utopian ideal that urban planners and the state have that we're going to get rid of cars. And anyone who's lived here any amount of time knows that there's no way you can survive in San Jose without a car. So it's impractical. And so those buildings that are being built, those entire neighborhoods around there are going to be inundated with parked cars. You're going to have to orbit your place for hours to try to find a parking spot. But the goal is, and the reason why there's so many of those developments happening is the state is mandating that San Jose has to build 62,000 homes. So that's why a lot of the local planning is being ripped away from localities and it's going to the state level because the HCD, the Housing and Community Development State Program, they're saying that we're not building enough housing quickly enough. And so they're making it much more easier for those types of developments to come online in order to satisfy the housing allotments, the number of houses that we're supposed to be building. So there's probably going to be a lot more coming down the pike if the economy is right for developers to build. But those large residential developments are meant to satisfy this huge demand that we have for housing. But I'm for them, but in the right place. And I don't believe a lot of these are being built in the right place because I'm for the sanctity of like single family housing. And I think we can have the best of both worlds. We can have that dense development downtown where it should be, as opposed to right here in our backyard.
Yeah. I'm sure on your list too, there's mass transportation. I used to travel to Southeast Asia. I was working, and you could get off a stop and wait only 3 minutes and go to your next location.
Right.
Here it's half an hour wait.
Yeah.
And sometimes you miss it.
Right.
So is anything being done in San Jose's mass transportation to improve it? To get people out of cars, basically?
Yeah. Again, so we are an urban sprawl city. So geographically, I think we're a long ways away for areas like this and Almaden from getting some serious mass transportation, multimodal transportation. There is a push, and it will happen soon, for BART to come in and complete its path to Deardown Station. So in the downtown core, wrapping the bay around, there's going to be mass transportation for folks that need to use that type of, for that area. I just don't see it coming out this far anytime soon, unfortunately. And folks in Almaden are suffering from it as well. And our light rail system is awful. They were laid for political reasons and not transportation reasons. And so I think those were a missed opportunity. But unfortunately, given how large, and San Jose in terms of landmass is one of the largest cities in the state, if not the country. So just logistically, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen anytime soon. I'm sorry to say. Yeah.
Well, thank you for those answers. Pleasure. Any other questions from anybody online or here? Thank you very much, George.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor. Appreciate it.
So that was refreshing to hear. Thank you for being part of our community now. Our next presenter, I believe, is Mr. David Smathers. He goes by David Moore. And David, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. You can use this. Yeah, thank you, Greg, and all of you for having me as a guest here. I appreciate it. Yeah, my name is David Smathers Moore, and I am. Can you hear me? Okay, is that too much? Too little? And I'm not from the neighborhood. I live in District 6 in the Shasta-Hanchett area on the Alameda. But I'm very involved in the CERT program, the Community Emergency Response Team program, which is across the city. Many of you in the organization are also involved in that. And now I'm working on this complementary initiative called the Village Hub that works with the CERT program to kind of meet what I think is a gap. And I'll explain that in my presentation. So are we going to, can we get the slides going? Okay. I was going to have you guys do introductions, but there's more people in this meeting than I thought there'd be, which is great. Congratulations on the life of the Los Paseos neighborhood organization. I guess I'll say a little bit more about my background. I've had a 30-year career in nonprofit management, community development, cooperatives, and my real interest is facilitation of group participation, like building organizations where multiple voices are heard and people make decisions together effectively. Can you see the slides online, the folks who are online? I guess I should say, if you can't see the
Yes, we
slides,
see it.
speak
We
up.
see it.
Okay.
Yes, we see it. Village
okay.
Hub, a quick intro.
Okay, yeah, Village Hub, quick intro. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Greg. And I'm going to skip over this because what I just said, there's a lot of folks here, and I think it's going to take too much time. So we'll go on to the next slide. So when a disaster strikes, for example, the Hayward Fault in this area is overdue for a major earthquake. And I highly recommend going online and on YouTube, Googling Haywired scenario. And there's an excellent video that the U.S. Geological Survey and a bunch of scientists have prepared about what the impacts would be of a major quake on that fault that we're overdue for. And if that happens, and lots of other natural disasters that are happening more frequently as the world changes, you could have a situation where your local neighborhood, for a pretty long period of time, is where everything that you need to live is going to have to come from right in this immediate neighborhood. We haven't had that kind of situation for a long time in the Bay Area, so it's easy to get complacent. But again, between the world changing and disasters happening more frequently, I recently saw a graph of billion-dollar cost disasters, the amount of damage, and the graph is just going skyrocketing coming up and in constant dollars. And so more and more we know like strong weather events and other disruptions are happening around the world. So it's important for communities to be better prepared. So in that, say, in the haywired scenario, they estimate that many parts of the Bay Area will be for a week or longer without internet, cell service, electric power, water, the things that we are all so used to. You know, we're so dependent on our phones, right? Like, how long can you go without this, right? So, okay, okay. How do I get this thing off of here? Yeah, it'll help me to turn around and look. So what do you guys think is the most critical thing in terms of preparedness to reduce mortality, for more people to live and survive through major disasters? What do you think is when researchers have studied this, what do you think is the most critical thing? So,
Water.
that makes sense. And of course, at one level, you're right. And it was kind of a trick question. The academic research says the most predictive thing of who will survive is how much social connection they have. So those of you who are involved in this neighborhood association, that's a very protective thing from a statistical standpoint, because people who know each other are more likely to go check on each other. They're more likely to just start problem solving. People can be very creative, and they're more likely to go bang on their neighbor's door if there's an evacuation order, and make sure that the person who's a little like, oh, I'm not going to go, that they at least talk to them. So having the kind of connections that the neighborhood associations has multiple values, right? And one of them is in difficult circumstances, people are more likely to help each other out. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so the presentation, you know, this is about this concept of the village hub. What is the village hub? The basic idea is that, yeah, you can go to the next slide. The basic idea is there's a lot of resources right here in your neighborhood, but we don't know all these resources. Let's say there's a nurse who lives 2 blocks down, but he or she commutes to a hospital 45 minutes away, usually. But now, after the disaster, that nurse is a really important community resource, right? There's also supplies and equipment. Somebody has a chainsaw in their garage. Probably a bunch of you guys do. All kinds of tools and equipment and things like, there's incredible people and equipment and supplies right here in your neighborhood. Well, actually, this map's my neighborhood, but visualize your neighborhood, right? So what the hub is simply a neighborhood meeting spot where people know to go there if there's no cell service, there's no electric power, things are all down. Maybe you don't even know what's going on. Maybe there's been a cyber attack. You don't even really know. Why is nothing working? You can go to the local hub location. It's a spot that's outdoors so that if there's been an earthquake, it's safe when there's aftershocks occurring and stuff. It's walkable. Ideally, there's village hubs within a 10-minute walk for most people in the city would be the goal. And it's promoted. If we establish one in a given area, if you guys decide to create one here, it would be important to do outreach to the neighbors. A lot of people are never going to come to a meeting like this or get involved in a committee, but they could at least know, oh, if something goes really bad, go to this meetup spot to get information, to offer help, to get help, to learn more about what's happening. Okay, next slide. So, and the things that happen at the Village Hub are things people do naturally all around the world after disasters. Just by nature of being human beings, people are creative and curious and they want to help each other. This photo is after the recent Hurricane Helene in North Carolina, one of the communities that was very cut off for a long time. These folks started inventing, they didn't know it, but what we call the Village Hub system. But with the system that of the hub has some methods for tracking stuff that's been developed in advance so that this kind of informal problem solving is much more efficient and effective because there's a few simple systems that can be planned in advance and that a few trained volunteers can run low tech, not using phones or computers or whatever. It's super simple, but with a little bit of planning can make this kind of community problem solving much more efficient. This was developed in Seattle, and they're grassroots organizations. They can work with government, but they aren't governmental organizations. It's very super simple, super low tech, super grassroots. Okay, next slide. Okay, there's 4 functions that the hub carries out. Next slide. I'm just going to give you a quick overview because I know we want to get through this quickly. The first function, the information one, yeah. I mentioned you might not even know what's going on. That's sometimes people just go out in the street after disaster and start talking to their neighbors. What happened? What do you know? So the first question is just basic information, critical announcements, and a message center where friends and family can post messages and find each other. Maybe there's a section that had to be evacuated of an area because of a flood or fire. So those families, how are they supposed to find each other? They can't go back to their house. They could go to the hub, and there's a section of the hub that's for posting messages for friends and family. This board's from a hub drill in Seattle, and you can see it has, this is all made up for their drill, but important announcements like that the city had issued a boil order so that because the water was not safe. That's, of course, something you want everyone in the neighborhood to know. Okay, next slide. The next function is connecting volunteers. People who are okay after a major disaster, most of them just naturally want to help. So they could come to the hub. What can I do? My family's fine, but I know a lot of people are in a difficult situation. So there's a system for tracking what kinds of help are needed and what kinds of skills people are offering. And basically, it's a very low-tech matching system to connect those folks. Same thing with supplies and equipment, just tracking, there's somebody in the neighborhood whose life depends on medical equipment. We're on day 5 with no power. Their batteries are getting low. Who has a generator? That kind of thing, like to solve some of the most urgent local problems. Next slide. Oh yeah, well, local hero, Wyman. This is we've had 2 hub practice training events in San Jose so far, and this Wyman has been active in that, and there he is. Okay, next slide. So the last slide's the topic's gonna be education. So we're so used to just looking anything up on our phones or online. Again, let's say there's no internet and there's no sewage system. How many of you know, how are you gonna go to the bathroom and protect your family from disease and infection and stuff? So, this is another thing. The hub doesn't accept donations of supplies and equipment. We try to get them directly to the household or place that they're needed, so they don't get collections like this, which the experts say is the disaster after the disaster, with a bunch of supplies that aren't where they really are needed. Okay, next slide. Sorry, I forgot what was in there. So this is the education thing I was starting to say. We have posters of different pieces of basic information, how to purify water, things like that, that if you can't look it up on your phone, would be available at the hub. Okay, next slide. So I mentioned about the CERT program, and this chart just shows in a little bit more detail. The CERTs have more training, so I'd say that they're at a higher level. It's a 20-hour training, and ideally, CERTs should be practicing and always, working on their skills and coordination. They do things like assess damage, do search and rescue, collapse buildings. They do first aid and set up triage centers and stuff like that. The hub doesn't do those things. The hub is much more basic. It's the things that I just went through. You can see how these 2 systems work really well together. So a neighborhood really should have both for a bunch of reasons. One is you don't want the CERT team to constantly be interrupted by these basic questions. The 10th person asking, like, how am I supposed to go to the bathroom? The sewage system's not working. Because they're like organizing to go do search in some buildings that collapse or whatever. So the hub might be in a park in a given community, and maybe there'd be a CERT command posts nearby, and the volunteers would know at the hub to try to attract the general public over to the hub and deal with all these common questions and more basic concerns so that the CERT volunteers who are trying to organize and carry out their mission are not as interrupted by the public. Okay, and I think we're so I'm developing this project to do training. I'm working with the folks in Seattle who developed the hub system. They've been kind of mentoring me and supporting me. And we're making some tweaks in San Jose with help of local volunteers who've been testing stuff out and making little improvements to the system. So we have classes and events. Here, if any of you are interested in learning more about this system, our Hubs 101 is an hour-and-a-half workshop. We go into a little more detail. These are these hanging organizers for. We have a system. We train in more detail about exactly how we keep track of information using its obviously very simple low-tech systems. And then we do hands-on practice events where we set up the tents and we have folks from the community come and role play scenarios. You get like a scout troop to come and they have these little things that they role play, like I can't find my dog or whatever, or there's no water. How are we gonna, whatever, all kinds of, some quite serious and lots of kind of silly situations or just unusual situations. And the hub volunteers practice how are we supposed to respond to this? How do we track the information? How do we make matches to help people solve problems? So we're doing, here's the dates of the next classes. And I think I'm just about at the end, and then we'll do questions and discussion. Okay, go ahead. Yeah. Oh, just because that's a particular workshop, like a basic class for hub volunteers. It's longer than tonight. I hope I haven't gone too long, but it's about an hour and a half, and we get into more of the mechanics of how we operate at the hub. And so if you guys are interested in starting a hub, I know one question would be for Los Paseos Neighborhood Association for you all to decide if this is a project you want to do or not. And there might be folks online, I don't know, who are not in Los Paseos. So anyone who's interested in setting up a hub, in addition to those courses and practice events that I just showed, the basic idea would be to first find a core group of probably 3 or more people who would be kind of like a committee that would work to develop the hub in a given neighborhood area. So that's not one person carrying the load, but like have a core group. And then these are some of the steps that working out what is the location. We might have to coordinate with Parks and Rec or with a property owner if the spot is actually a meetup that's on somebody's, I don't know, a vacant lot or something. Make sure everybody's on board and that all's on the up and up in terms of local arrangements. And there's some basic supplies. It's pretty simple. These hanging organizers, and I have like a box with a few other things. It's kind of like hub in a box. Like this is always in my van, And so if you had 3 or 4 people in the neighborhood who had this, so if somebody's out of town, at least 1 or 2 people can go set up the hub after the disaster. And then, you can have more elaborate versions with those tent canopies and additional supplies. But the basic idea is super simple. And then you can kind of build out from there depending on what's needed. And so here's another one of our courses coming up. This is for people who want to start a hub in their neighborhood. It's a little bit more in depth about these steps of establishing a new hub location. And here's my contact information. If anyone's interested, they can contact me directly. Any questions, if we don't have time to get to them tonight, or if you're interested in starting a hub, here's my email. And that's it. I think we'll open up if there's any further questions or discussion. Yeah.
How much training? What do you anticipate are the training needs say for a core person and for the training for a person who's not one of the cores?
Yeah. So we're kind of in the learning curve, but here's our current thinking, and we kind of adjusting as we're going. To be a basic volunteer, you take that Hubs 101 course, which is an hour and a half, and then come to, on a different day, a practice event that's several hours on a Saturday morning. And you'd have the basic sense. I mean, we could defer to ask Wyman, like, do you feel, Wyman, like you learn the basics pretty much?
It's pretty much where maybe a couple of hours, you said 1.5 hour, 2 hours of training, and then a practice session, which is another 2 hours. And that's pretty much enough to get you started. I mean, it's not rocket science, right?
Yeah, it's very
I mean, it's basically how do you help your fellow neighbors, your fellow community members when the crap hits the fan, when you have a major disaster.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think in all of us, we want to help our neighbors. And I think that's really the main thing.
Yeah. And then the next level up, so that's kind of like to be a hub volunteer, part of the local team. And then the next level up would be the core groups that's going to establish a new hub in a community that doesn't have one yet. And I was saying in that one slide a moment ago that if you had 3 people who committed to working a couple hours a month for 6 months, I think they could develop a hub. So not a huge amount of time, but I think it'd be good to have a core group that commits that they're going to work on this. So it's not one person kind of carrying the whole project, but at least 3 people working on it for a number of months. And there, like I said, there's another course for people who are setting up a new one. That's a 3-hour course. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate something. I mean, I think David has already mentioned it. Some of us are CERT people, community emergency response people. We've gone through a certain level of training. Like you said, it's about 20 hours. So it's kind of a big commitment. But the hub is something where, if you're unable to commit to an extended training period, this is really a way to get your neighborhood and community prepared for a major disaster.
Yeah, it's a lot less time than CERT. It's a way in to get involved with a few hours.
Karen has had her hand up.
I wanted to get a little more information, or if you could maybe describe those black things a little bit, in a little bit more detail. I see them on the video, but can you kind of explain how they're used, one, and then what exactly are the storage requirements? I mean, how much space do you really need to store the stuff?
Yeah, those are great questions. Okay, just really briefly on the use of, and let me see, am I visible on the screen here? Yeah, it looks like I am. Okay, so you remember those 4 areas that the hub addresses? So these hanging things that you see right here are addressing 3 of those. The information tracking, there would also be a whiteboard where the most important things would be posted, like you saw a photo in the presentation. But this is tracking information that's coming in that we may or may not yet think should be posted on the whiteboard for everybody who's walking by. And so there's these forms. It's one form that's used through the whole system. I won't go in super detail, but there's a plus and minus on each form. So with information, if it's something that we know is verified and we think is accurate, it has the plus sign. And then with the volunteers thing, this is a little more clear what the plus and minus, how it works. With this card, where there's a plus sign and the headline is nurse, that means that a nurse has offered their services and are available. And if there's a negative sign circled, it means that people are looking for it. Like, for example, here's a negative sign is circled and the headline is Spanish English translator. So that means that some situation in the neighborhood, some people have said this would be really helpful, and the information got posted here with the negative side. And then there's more details would be on the form below filled out about specifically the situation. Same thing with the supplies and equipment. The plus sign here with tarps means that somebody's offering tarps. Maybe it's pouring rain and there's been an earthquake. They think that might be helpful. When it's the negative sign circled right here, somebody's looking for a chainsaw. So that's the basic idea. There's some more details that we'd go through in the Hubs 101 course. And in terms of the supplies, we're experimenting with this really simple, the white box that I just showed a second ago. It would just have basically these hanging organizers, maybe a tarp, maybe the vests that the volunteers wear to signify who's running the hub, some paperwork, the posters for education. Could be in this box. Actually, I'm finding it could be even maybe a smaller box. We're experimenting with this. The system in Seattle, they have these big steel boxes that are like 5 or 6 feet by 2 or 3 feet. They're kind of like the kind of boxes you might see for tools to be stored outdoors, and it's pretty thick metal, pretty heavy duty. And they have those in a lot of parks in Seattle, and they're like locked to a chain link fence or that kind of thing. We're exploring a simpler way that doesn't require buying those boxes that are expensive and heavy. And so we'll see. You know, we're kind of in a learning curve here. This is a new project in San Jose, and we're starting out with the simplest options, and we will see over time, like, does that really work, or do you need to have those more elaborate heavy duty boxes? It also depends on the neighborhood. Like, for example, here in Los Paseos, if you guys decided to move ahead, I understand that the neighborhood association has access to like a field house or some kind of building in the park, which is outstanding, right? So something like that, there could be different creative solutions. There's also, in some of the hubs in Seattle, there's a neighbor who's part of the hub team who has bigger plastic boxes in their backyard that include like those tent canopy structures and stuff. And they've let the other hub volunteers in the area know where it is and to go into their backyard. So they have permission. So if that homeowner is out of town or something, the other hub volunteers have permission to go during disaster and get a larger plastic box out of the yard. So there's different options. It depends on the situation. And we're also going to experiment with this with more of our hub drills and stuff and see if this most simple version of this seems to work okay, or what feedback we get from our volunteers.
I have a question.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have any leaflets that can be handed out to our houses and neighborhoods?
I do, I didn't bring any, sorry, but I have templates and stuff. It probably would be good they could be customized a little bit to the situation in your local neighborhood, whether it was kind of encouraging people to come to a community event and learn more, or
something like along those lines.
Yeah, that's part of developing the system. And also part of what you'd have in the box is flyers that you could go after the disaster has happened. And if you have extra volunteers who don't have anything to do, you could say, hey, go flyer the neighborhood. And because some people won't know, despite your best efforts, some people never heard of the hub, but maybe the disaster happened 6 hours ago and some volunteers are just going around saying, there is this meetup location.
Yeah.
If you want more information about what's happening, go to this place. So there's different versions of flyers that we could help you with.
Work with you on flyers.
Yeah.
We'd like to canvas. There's 1,500 homes in this neighborhood.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing, of course, is kind of getting clear, does this neighborhood association want to create a hub, or some group of people? I mean, there may or may not officially be the neighborhood association. I have no idea how you guys work, but getting clear about, like, is there a group of people who want to do this project? Who's the core group of folks who are working on it? And then I can be a resource to them with all kinds of materials. And
okay, I have a question for the audience. I see some people here that I haven't seen before, maybe a couple times here and there. What do you think of this project in our neighborhood?
Yeah, definitely this is helpful for us. Preparedness is always important because we never know when the disaster will happen. So definitely knowing this information upfront definitely help us. Definitely, I'm in for this project. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this is really innovative, like, and probably it's a very simple solution. So when disaster strikes, it's uh, some basic stuff, but we always forget. So it's good to have a local center where we can go out, reach out for information. So yeah, definitely, I think we should have a hub, like, so because we never know when the disaster strikes, right? So,
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, I think it's super useful to have some sort of a hub for people to kind of go to for one place of information exchange. But also, I think this is as robust as it can get, like a container full of information, full of resources, and then if anything, it creates like a network of people. So for people who just need help with, getting to know somebody in the neighborhood or medical supplies or any of that other information that they might need from somebody else, it serves as a good catalyst in that way too. So.
yeah, great. I want to go back to
Thank you.
something that somebody referred to, which of course, the bottom of, if you think of, there's something they call the preparedness pyramid, and the bottom level is what you have in your own household. And most of what you're going to need after disaster, you should try to have in your own household and not expect other systems or resources to be available. But then the next level up, that's not as much stuff. If you picture a pyramid, narrower, is the community, your local community, and that's kind of where the hub is. But you still should really try to have as much of your own, all the standard things you hear about having: water, food, first aid, all those things that we know people should have their preparedness kits. Those are really important. That's not, you should do that. And then also on top of that is having these community resources. And then the higher levels, there's CERT, and then there's professional responders and agencies, and nonprofits, Red Cross. And so it's all of these things together solution. And so start with your own household preparedness.
Thank you. You have a question?
So in the Seattle area, have they considered homes that have pools as a resource for water? The reason why I ask is I have a pool, my guy behind me has a pool, the person diagonally, there's close to 90,000 gallons of water there that basically is purified.
That's really interesting. I've never heard about that. And I went up and visited in Seattle and was there for a long weekend for their hubs drill that last summer. Never heard that come up. But that's interesting. And I personally don't know, like, does anyone happen to know about like what you need to do for that water to be safe to drink? Can it become safe to drink? I don't know. Like,
It's safe to drink. I had a pool service business, so
oh, okay.
It's safe to drink because kids do
Uh-huh.
all the time, and
Mhm.
it has to be safe to be in it.
Yeah.
Even if they pee in it after a while, it's still good because of the chlorine in it, and they're,
Yeah. When you're,
yeah.
and
But number one thing would be drinking.
uh-huh.
I mean, because you could then boil it too.
Yeah.
But it could be used for other stuff too. I mean, you could use it for
Yeah.
washing. You could, so
Cooking.
even if you can't drink it, you could use it for all of other interesting things.
Thank you. And this kind of is a good example of it takes a village kind of thinking. Like I've never came up, and I just learned something. Like, so thank you.
Yeah. You should be aware that you have 30 gallons of water at any one time in your hot water heater. So if there is a disaster, you need to shut off the incoming water valve. Then you crack a faucet somewheres and you can draw water out of the bottom of the tank. And that's 30 gallons of good drinkable water.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. Mhm.
Thank you, John. Teresa, have any comments? Thank you all for your inputs. Appreciate that.
Mhm. Well, and thanks for making time for this topic. I appreciate the opportunity to come here and present, and good discussion, and thank you.
Maybe one question. Does anybody in the Zoom audience have a question for David?
No, but it sounds great. You got me excited, and they know that's a lot.
Excellent.
Any, anybody else in the Zoom audience?
I just jump in. I have a quick comment.
Yeah.
Gina Whitney. I'm over on the Avenida España side of Santa Teresa. We have some groups, like we have a sort of a street group since COVID that gets together every Friday, North Creek Drive. So we have mailing list and stuff like that. And I'm sort of thinking I don't know, it's different for different communities and cities and Seattle and whoever, but we might have a lot of sort of mini hubs. And maybe we're unique in that way, but we could be like a mini hub, or maybe we could just be an Avenida España hub. But we have I'm just thinking that what's the distance that you are working with, and the more kind of local you could be, the better, both for communication and resources and information and all that stuff, and still connected to a bigger hub that's going to have things like nurses and stuff that's not so common, right?
But you also may have resources within your neighborhood that you could offer to the wider hub
Oh,
as
of
well.
course, of course.
So it's deepening and strengthening the
Right.
the network, not replacing it.
Oh, of course, yes. But just, yeah, you can imagine you have a central hub that, has a radius of, a mile or two, but then you could have sort of blocks that feed and work with that as well, I don't
Yeah,
know.
absolutely. It's a really good point. This is not a one size fits all solution. Communities are very different. So I'm working with a group of neighbors in the Dry Creek area, like South Willow Glen. And because of the geography of that street that's kind of unusual, they just had a meeting with like 15 people who they kind of want to create like a mini hub because of the way the streets are laid out and the lots are big or whatever. That's great. Like it could be different depending on the community. It would be very different with like high rise, area with tall buildings. Maybe there's a hub for one building where there's lots of floors to the building. So it's
All right,
very,
there's the
adaptable to the situation.
sorry, and there's Santa Teresa condos and, different groups like that, I suppose, that might naturally sort of huddle together and provide a mini hub. Yeah.
Mhm.
Great, thanks.
I'd like to chime in a little bit here. David, we're working with him for San Jose Neighborhood CERT, trying to get more people involved. This is a stepping stone to CERT. And what you're talking about, Gina, is basically we had these village hubs, and then we go up to a command post, which would have CERT people that are trained in first aid and things like that in the community. So there's stepping stones here that kind of we're working on with all the communities throughout the city to support, just when stuff hits the fan, what are we going to do? And Village Hub is one component to that, and then the next step would be the CERT component. It's 20 hours course. So we're trying to figure all this out, work it out, and we're looking for people that are interested, and we're going to try to help them. So that's our objective.
Yeah, thanks, Herbert. It's very much like an interconnected system. And you can imagine people, starting as a hub volunteer, and then those who get really into it, then going on and taking CERT training.
I have a question for Gina. Gina, over in Avenida España, would you be interested in getting involved with this if we start a little group here to get this going?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Okay, and you have my contact info?
Yes, yeah, Greg, sure, no problem.
Okay, alrighty.
Yeah.
Plus, she's retired too.
That
We
always
used to work together.
Yep.
Gina, are you the same Gina that was involved with the EIH at Bernal and Rue Ferrari?
No.
Really?
Uh,
Oh, I'm pretty sure there's another Gina Whitney on that.
yeah, I don't think there's one in the area. But
Huh.
maybe. All right. But no, I was not involved in that.
I'd like to make our area a pilot for this. So Gina, you'd be welcome, and whoever in the neighborhood to pilot this. So we're working on that with David, and we'll go from there and keep you in the loop.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Gina, and everybody. I think that's it. Any other questions from the audience here? Thank you. Thank you very much for your inputs. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Oh, yes, one more question. Hold on a second.
So after establishing these hubs, like how many times did you actually had to like were these efficient during disasters? How many times did you actually encounter a disaster? Like,
You know, they haven't, the official system or whatever of hubs is only in Seattle, and they've never really used it. However, what they say when I've asked them is they're like, we're confident that this will work because it's basically what we see people do all over the world. Like I showed that picture in North Carolina. People do kind of very kind of disorganized on the fly hubs all the time without having thought about it in advance. And all we're doing with the hub is doing a little bit of pre-planning and getting more people to know each other in the area in advance. So it's something that is pretty basic to human nature, I think. Like people help each other out and they just problem solve and improvise as best they can, you know, after disasters. That pretty much happens around the world. And so this is just adding a little more structure to that.
thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time and attention and all the questions and comments. This was great. I appreciate the
Thank
opportunity.
you very much, David. Nice to meet you.
All right.
Thank you.
Very informative and positive and solid. Thank you.
Great.
Well,
More agenda items?
Barbara, I think we're done, Barbara, and Zoom audience. Thank you for attending. I recognize some people.
Thank you. It was a good meeting.
With that, the meeting is adjourned at 8:22. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, you guys.